Welcome, welcome, welcome to Just Minding My Business. I hope you're having an amazing day. And our guest today is James Brown, who is the CEO, founder of Business Accelerator Institute and Perseverance Squared. With a background in law and business, James launched his first successful business in 1994 and later transitioned to coaching, where he has driven significant growth for over 350 business owners nationwide. He's also the co-author of the best-selling book, Shift Happens, and a recognized industry expert. Get ready for insights on strategic management, marketing, and building a thriving business. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much, Ida, for having me today. What an introduction.
Yes, well, you did it.
Yeah, I tend to not I downplay all the things that I've done. I know it's a blessing, just to be able to help other people.
Yes, yes, and that's what we're here for, to be a light for humanity,
Yes.
for sure. Wow. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Okay. You talk about the seven essential parts of every thriving business. You want to tell us what that is?
Yeah, so when I launched my first business, it was my law firm. I went into consumer bankruptcy law, mostly because my background was I worked at General Motors on the assembly line through undergraduate and law school, and I saw a lot of like bad stuff happen to good people through no fault of their own. So
Hmm.
I sent out 200 resumes when I graduated law school and passed the bar exam, and I got zero response. And in hindsight, I wouldn't have hired me either because I had no legal experience. But what that did was it forced me to jump into owning my own place. And so I had no clue. I had no clue. All I know is I wanted to help people. And so let's just hang up my shingle and people will come. And so everything was kind of jumbled together, right? Trying to get the revenue coming in. Do we need to hire people? Do we have systems in place? All of this stuff was just all jumbled together. And through that process, through some difficult times and learning the hard way, I figured out that my business had seven parts, really. Um, the first is marketing,
Huh?
the second is sales, the third is what I call the factory, or how we're going to deliver what it is we sell. The fourth is the people to run the factory. The fifth is your physical plant, and it could be virtual or it could be a brick and mortar place. Um, the sixth is money and metrics. And the last and final piece of the business is you, the owner. Because without that piece, the business doesn't exist. So when I started looking at that, it's like, okay, this tells a story, right? Of where do I want to go as the owner? And when I work with business owners, I always start with the you part. And what is it you're trying to accomplish? And how much revenue does the business need to generate in order for you to be able to do that? Like one of the things that was really important to me was buying back my time so that I could volunteer with the Red Cross. And I've been on 15 deployments with the Red Cross, hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes. And when they call you, it literally is like a military deployment. They'll call and say, hey, can you go to Florida for a hurricane? Yes, I can. Okay, you have to leave in 24 hours.
Wow.
Here's an 800 number to call where you can get your air ticket and all that stuff. And but I had to have my business in a place where it could run without me,
Yeah.
right? And so I would be gone for 30, 35 days at a time and the business didn't miss a beat. And because my factory was well thought out and the systems and procedures, and then I had the people plugged in to run the factory. And if anybody was ever not there, there was a backup person that knew how to do that job. So they just stepped in their shoes and did it. So it didn't involve me, right? So as I kind of figured out that the business has 7 parts. If I start with the gross revenue that I need to run my business, the next thing I want to do is how do I tell my sales team how many sales we need? Right. So the first thing is, what is my average sale value? So if I want to build $1 million firm and my average sale value is $5,000, then I need 200 sales. All right. I just told my sales team exactly what they need to do. Now, how do I tell the marketing part of my business how many leads to generate? And so you can just reverse engineer that based on conversion rates and things like that and figure out, okay, if I want to get 200 clients next year or 200 sales, I need 800 customers coming in, potential customers. And in order to get 800 potential customers, I need 1,500 leads. So where are they going to come from? So now I'm building out the marketing section of my plan. Then it's like, okay, if I go from 100 sales this year to 200 next year, is my factory going to break? Do I
Mm,
have the systems, the software, the technology, or do I need to upgrade some things? And does the capacity of my current team, can they take on another 100 sales a year? Maybe not. Well, then who do I need to hire and when? So now I'm building out the people section of my plan. So, and then I started comparing this to other businesses, and all the other businesses have the same 7 parts. The only thing that's different is what we sell,
yes. Yes.
right? And when you look at it that way, and you put together a business plan that addresses all 7 parts of the business, it tells a story of exactly what you're going to do and when in order to achieve this goal.
Yes.
And to me, now you have something that you can pull out every month and then look at your actual data and compare it against your projected plan data and then make adjustments. Are we on track or are we not on track? Are we ahead of it? If we're ahead of it, hey, let's adjust our goal. If we're behind, what adjustments do we need to do to get there? Right.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it that way as a business owner, it takes a lot of the overwhelm away of running the business. The concept of running a business, a successful, profitable business, is simple. Okay. Nobody said it's going to be easy. That's two different concepts.
Yes.
But when you follow the 7 parts and you see how they all play together, the concept is simple.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's kind of the cornerstone of everything that I do when I work with business owners now.
And I like how you brought all that together. And that's exactly what it is.
It is. And for me, a lot of times where business owners get in trouble is we're great technicians. We're really good at what we do. Okay. So we think we have this thought, oh, I can just go start my own business and I'll make a lot more money. Right. But we're stuck in technician mode. And most of us have not been trained to manage people, to be an entrepreneur and how to drive in new business, how to set up systems or how to read financials so you understand the data and you're making decisions based on data. We haven't been trained in anything like that. When I went to law school, they didn't give me any training on how to start a law firm. I had to
No.
figure it out. Right. And most business owners are that way. So where they get caught in a trap is they're working 40, 50 hours for this person. And they're like, man, I could go start my own place and make more money. And then they find themselves trading that job for a 70 to 80-hour week
Mm,
business that's tied to them 24/7. And they're not making any money to show for it. So it's like, why did we even do this?
yeah.
Right. And what I want people to know is there's a different way. There's a different way to do it. It's just we don't know what we don't know. And
Hmm.
until you start learning other possibilities and testing them in your business, all of a sudden you have these light bulb moments, right? And it just is like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it this way, you
Yeah.
know. And so that's what I try to empower business owners to do, is really think in terms differently of the business and how it all plays together.
Yes, because it's a lot to take on a business. It's more than an idea. It's more than a passion. Of course, all of that is involved, but
Hmm.
the logistics of it is can be overwhelming if you don't have if you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And we get caught also in the trap of making decisions based on emotion
mm,
in our business. Like, we don't have the data at our fingertips. So then we're shooting from the hip and we're like, well, my gut feeling is we should do this. And that's ultimately how you make a lot of really expensive, either in terms of money or time, mistakes in your business,
yes.
because we don't have the data to look for. An example of this is I had an attorney that worked for me and he wasn't getting his work done. He was like 3 or 4 days behind everybody else's current. And I went in and I asked him and I said, what's going on? Why are you behind? He said, well, I'm constantly on the phone, incoming, outgoing calls. I can't get to my work. Naive me had an emotional decision. So I walked across to my office manager and I said, let's put an ad out for another attorney. And this is an $80,000 a year decision, right? So she
Mhm.
looked at me and she said, why? I said, because Joe can't keep up with his work because he's always on the phone. And then she just sat there and she said, did you look at the phone records? And I was just silent. I'm like, no. And she said, don't you think you should? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. And so I went and looked at the phone records. And the day before, incoming and outgoing calls, he was on the phone for 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And I,
Oh,
I went back 3 weeks and it was never more than 7 minutes a day.
oh, so he was
Right.
just not doing.
Yes. And so I almost, based on gut feeling or emotion, pulled the trigger on an $80,000 a year employee, which would reduce my profits as a business owner
Mhm.
because I didn't know the data,
Right.
right? So we always, when we can get in a position where we're making decisions based on data, you will avoid a lot of headaches, a lot of wasted money, a lot of wasted time in growing your business.
Yes, yes, you definitely have to look at the data i- to see what you need.
Yeah.
And it's like it's simple as fixing a meal. You
Yeah.
can't just say you're gonna fix a meal, and number one, you don't know what you're gonna fix. Number two, you
Right.
don't know the ingredients that you're gonna need to prepare it. So when you think about it in layman terms, it makes sense. But a lot
Yeah.
of times people go into businesses and they don't think that way about it.
Right. Right. And, for me, I take the business owner as I find them, because a lot of times I find that they just don't know. I had a business owner that just started working with me in the last 2 weeks, and I do a first initial call to kind of deep dive into the business. And I said, okay, how much is your revenue so far year to date? And he said, well, I don't have my books yet. All right.
Mm,
So that was little red flag number one. And I'm like, okay, fine. How much was your revenue in 2024? I don't have that done yet either.
oh wow. So
How
he
about 2023? I don't have that either. Right. I said, how much is your payroll ratio to your revenue? He said, I have no clue. I said,
mm,
okay, we're going to stop right here because I don't want you to feel like you're being judged. I'm literally asking you questions that you, as the owner, should have your fingers right on that information. Since you don't, we're going to start putting things in place going forward, and that's never going to happen again. Right. But that's how bad sometimes it is. He just didn't know what he didn't know, and he's trying to run it on his own, and he's
yes.
not keeping up with this stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the drawbacks of being a solopreneur. You wear a lot of hats, you're delivering a product. You're
Yeah.
creating a product and you don't get you don't have enough time to do all this other stuff. Or you haven't made time, even though it's really important for you to know all of that.
Yeah.
So I mean, so how do you get that solopreneur that is wearing all these hats to focus on these things?
It's a very good question, Ida. Um, the actual amount of time I spend on the seven parts of the business, I would say 75 to 80% of it is you. And it's the mindset
Mm,
that they have. Um, it's walking them through some examples like I just did with that attorney that wasn't getting his work done. And I said if I would have added $80,000 to my payroll ratio would have been much higher than it needed to be, which is normally between 33 and 43%, right? If it's higher than that, then you're losing money. So when I walk them through some examples like that, and I put myself in their shoes, because I literally will tell people I've made more mistakes in business than you've even thought of, right? And so I want you to run these things by me so that I can say, hey, look, I've been through that already and here's what you want to avoid, right? So it's getting them to think differently. And the hard part about that is, Ida, is when they have limiting beliefs,
mm,
right? Limiting beliefs based on a certain experience, or they heard about somebody else having an experience. So
mm,
they automatically, in their mind, adopt that position. Oh, I said, okay, well, have we tried pay per click? Oh, pay per click doesn't work. I've done that before.
mm,
A colleague of mine tried pay per click and it didn't work. So they're dismissive, and then I'll walk them through what exactly did you do
yes.
and what was the click through rate, and I ask them about the data and they don't know the answers. They just know that they did. And I said, how? Okay, so how do you judge that it wasn't successful? They said, well, I didn't make any money off of it. I'm like, okay, but does that mean your marketing wasn't working, or maybe your intake wasn't handling the appointments and not getting them to set an appointment, and then they weren't showing up, or maybe your salesperson sucks and so you're not making any money? And I literally had a business owner who I got on the phone with her one day, and she said, I'm right off the bat, she was really energetic. And she said, I'm canceling pay per click. And I knew right then it's an emotional decision. I said, okay, walk me through why. And she said, I spent $5,000 last month on pay per click and I didn't get a single dollar from it. So I'm canceling it. I said, let's walk through the numbers. And I said, how many impressions did you get? And she said, 10,000 something impressions. I don't remember. And then I said, okay, how many clicks? She said 782. So
Mm,
immediately I'm thinking, that's almost an 8% click through rate. The average click through rate for pay per click is like 2.9%.
mm,
So that tells me the ad is working, right? Now the click goes to a landing page, right? The average landing page converts at 10%. So I said, out of the 782 people that hit your landing page, how many of those called your business? She said 115.
wow.
I'm like, that's 14.9%. So that's enough to tell me the marketing is successful. It
Mhm.
delivered the right person in the right frame of mind at the right time to her doorstep. I said, out of the 115 phone calls, how many appointments were set? She said four. And two of them didn't show up, and the other two they didn't hire us, so I'm canceling pay per click. I'm like, you don't have a pay per click problem, you have an intake problem,
Right.
right? So the ROI that we make on our advertising spend, there's a lot of moving parts. And when we don't know that data or we're not looking at it, we make an emotional decision just to cancel it. And then we have a limiting belief that it doesn't work,
Right.
right? So overcoming those, I have to give them other examples of how it can work, or What if we tried this? Are you willing to do that?
Mhm.
And we can do a split test. Yeah, I can do that. Um, I had one where his landing page was converting at 7%, so the average is 10. So I said, let's take the navigation options off the top, so they can't leak off of this landing page, and let's test one without. And he was reluctant to do it. And then we put it out there, and within 2 weeks, the new landing page was converting 39%.
Wow.
And now all of a sudden he's like, crap, why didn't I do that earlier? I said, because you had a limiting belief, right?
Mm,
So I have to find ways to get them to overcome limiting beliefs. And a lot of times it's also terror barriers.
yes.
As human beings, we get very anxious when we're about to face something we've never done before.
Yes,
And
we
that's the side of the brain that's designed to keep us safe and comfortable,
Mhm.
right? So I've had business owners who keep hitting a certain revenue, 300,000, 400,000, 300,000, but they want to make $1 million, but they can't seem to break through it. And when I start talking to them about it, there's something in their childhood
Mm,
where they're almost embarrassed if they're too successful because their siblings all make $20 an hour and they don't want to be perceived as a snob. And so they fear taking the next step. And it's total illusion, right?
yes.
Even after 20 years in representing 80,000 people in bankruptcy cases, every time I would go to federal court, I would get sick to my stomach and I'd have to go throw up.
Mm,
And in my mind, I was thinking, all my colleagues are going to think I'm stupid when I get up there, right? I was told my whole life that I won't accomplish anything. And so that's stuck, right? Our subconscious mind is developed before we're 7 years old.
yes.
And so when I was told, you can't do this, you can't do this, you're not good enough for that, I was 50 years old and I'm going into court and that's in my mind.
Mm,
But then I had to step back and I said, wait a second, when's the last time I've ever lost an argument? And I couldn't remember it. Honest to God, I couldn't remember it. So the facts were different. The illusion, I said, bull, this is bull. And then I just forge ahead, right? And so you have to break through those terror barriers because most of the time it's just an illusion.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we've all had those talks with ourselves like that,
Absolutely.
whether it was at your home or a teacher or even on a job, somebody said something to you that just altered the way you thought about yourself,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was not true and never was true.
No. But you adopted it as true.
Yes.
And now you have this subconscious belief throughout your whole life that is true. As
Yes.
successful I am right now, and it's hard for me to even say that, right? But my law firm I built to about $8 million a year. And then I sold it and I went into working with business owners. And I've helped over 450 business owners do exactly what I did. And I still to this day think, why am I worthy to do this?
Mm,
I'm not any different than anybody else, but that's my subconscious mind.
yes. Yes. Wow, James. So if people want to work with you, how do they do so?
Yeah, so the best way we built a landing page just for your listeners.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
it's called Business Accelerator dot institute. So not dot com, it's dot institute /MMB.
Okay.
And they can find out information about Business Accelerator. They can reach out to me through there. You can find us on LinkedIn, and I answer all the messages on LinkedIn. And so anybody who wants to find out more, please reach out. Don't try to struggle yourself and figure things out because I can tell you that's the long road. And it's one of the reasons why most businesses will ultimately fail.
Or take
is,
forever to see
yeah,
a revenue.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. And everything is you have to work from the inside out, you
You
know.
do.
Every day it's a struggle.
And when I work with business owners, before I even get into their financial goals, I talk to them about what's your personal and professional goals, right?
Hmm.
What are you going to do to improve your mindset in order to become a 3 million, 5 million, $10 million business owner? How do you start thinking like the owner of a $10 million business now? So we work on that a lot before we ever get into the financials, because if most people, if you don't grow personally and professionally, you'll never grow financially.
All right. It's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all connected. So how do a person how does a business owner get into your program?
So we have several different ways. Right now, I have one-on-one clients that I work with. I do a handful of those, where I'm doing 3 calls a month with them. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're putting their business plan together, we're putting their marketing plan together, their budget, and then every month we're tracking their data and we're looking at their financials and we're making adjustments. And that's what those calls are doing. Um, I have mastermind groups, so some people will get involved in a one-to-many type situation. So 4 times a year, I have mastermind meetings that people come in. One's next week. And that's another way to get involved. And then Business Accelerator Institute, what I'm trying to do there is more of the one-to-many because I can't work with everybody.
Right, right.
Right. So I'm developing think of a Harvard Business School catalog of courses.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be level 100, level 200, level 300, 400, and graduate level. And at each level, there's going to be courses on all 7 parts of the business, and we're setting them up as 4-week courses. So that's going to be on a very low entry price of like $249 a month. And you have access to all of those courses. The first course that you'll go through is called 5 Weeks to Launch Crafting Your Winning Business Plan. And it'll show you how to walk through those 7 parts of the business and have a plan put together so that you can really launch your business and get off to a good start. Then, as you stay in the courses, maybe you're getting ready to hire, so you can go to hiring and staffing, or compensation models course and things like that. So that's what we're doing now with Business Accelerator Institute, is really building out the online education.
That's awesome, James, because a lot of businesses need all of that.
Yes.
All of that. And I mean, and they may have even been in business for a while
Yeah.
and still need it.
Yeah. And anybody who comes in through, Business Accelerator Institute, you'll have access to a weekly open office hours. So every Wednesday morning from 8 to 10 a.m., I open my Zoom room, and anybody who wants to jump in there and ask questions can ask questions.
No,
Right. And
that's
it's first
awesome.
come, first serve. So even though you're going through the courses, you'll be able to come and say, hey, I'm not sure I understand this concept. Right. Can you walk me through it? And so we give them access to that kind of thing so that we make sure they're progressing forward.
Yes, yes. Wow. So 5 weeks to launch. And
5 weeks to launch. Yep.
I heard you talk a lot about a winning business plan.
Hmm.
So I'm sure it could consist of the 7 pillars.
Yes.
Okay. But as we all know, business plans are, I call them living documents
Correct.
because you start one place and then you end up another place.
Yeah.
So, what does that look like with your students? How do you
Yeah. And
understand that concept?
and that's why we want to have regular check-ins,
Hmm.
right? Because where people if they put together a business plan, a lot of people are doing it just because they think they have to, or they're presenting it to a bank for some seed money, right? And then they take it and they put it in a drawer and they never look at it. Okay. And so this is a living, breathing business plan. And every month, like I just got off the call with somebody who our goal revenue for June is 257,000 based on our business plan. She's at 216,000 right now. We're only halfway through the month, right? So we're on pace. We're ahead of pace. So my conversation with her is let's not get comfortable, right? Let's look at analyze what we did right and what caused, and now let's repeat it in July, right? And then I do the same thing if people, if they have a $257,000 goal for this month and they're only at 100 right now, then I'm like, where are we falling short? Is it sales? Is it not setting appointments, not being able to close a sale? Are we collecting the money from people? Or is our leads down? And if our leads are down, from what source? And then let's make adjustments there. So the key to a successful business plan is regularly measuring actual data versus your projections and then making adjustments every month.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
by doing that, you will drastically reduce the chances that you don't end up at least close to where you wanted to be.
Yes. Absolutely. Got to keep looking at the data
Yes.
for sure. Now let's talk a little bit about your best-selling book, Shift Happens.
Yes.
Tell us about that and what people can take away from that.
Yeah. So that was a book that I was approached with back in the early, right at the end of, at right at 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
My firm was at its peak. I had offices in 4 different states, and the economy was going in the wrong direction. And it was the housing mortgage bubble burst
Mm-hmm.
at that time. So there was this big shift in the economy. So the company that wanted this book, they reached out to several experts that were seeing shifts in the economy to write about it and what to do. And so I wrote a chapter in that book about business owners. And when you see a shift in the economy, things that you should be doing or things you should be looking out for, and let's say establishing multiple sources of revenue instead of just one, right? The worst number in business is one. And the kind of technical name for that is concentration risk. So if I just looked at somebody's data earlier today and 78% of their leads are coming from one source. And I'm like, we need to diversify that, right? Because if Google ever changes their algorithms like they always do, and all of a sudden you stop getting leads, you're going to go bankrupt really quick. If you have one staff member who's a key staff member, but nothing's documented and it's all in their head, they've been with me 10 years, I'm good. And then they quit, or God forbid, they pass away.
Yes.
We're screwed,
Mhm.
right? Because we have concentration risk. So the goal of that book was to help business owners identify when shifts are going to happen that can affect their business and how to insulate themselves from that.
Mhm. And it's just it's common sense. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to do that in your home.
Well, I think what the reason it happens, and it happened to me too. And I only did consumer bankruptcy cases, no other type of cases.
Right.
And in 2005, they revamped the federal bankruptcy laws, and it was the first time they changed the laws in 20 years.
Mm.
And they developed this means test, and you had to pass a means test before you could file a bankruptcy. And so there was all this media attention about it on how you could no longer file bankruptcy. And I didn't make any changes.
Mm,
right? In 2006, I lost 60% of my business, and so I struggled. It was the first time I had to lay some people off,
mm,
and then I had to add another practice area, right? When I should have done it proactively because they had been talking about the changes for a couple of years, right? Well,
yes.
I didn't do it. So we get stuck in those situations where we find ourselves that, uh-oh, we get comfortable, right? Things are
Yes.
working very well. I don't have to do much. And then boom, something changes,
Yes, and you
you
always
know?
have to stay educated as well,
Yes.
forecasting and things like that. Always, because I'm in the tech field. So
Hmm.
I've always got to stay what's coming, what's happening right now, what could change to change the landscape of different things. So for me, that's just in my DNA.
Yeah.
Because of the field that I am in. But yeah, it's easy to get stuck, especially when you're doing great,
Yep.
because you have
And
no
that was the
reason
one
to say,
time in my career where I got caught by it. My wife has always told me, she's like, you always have this knack for knowing when something is going to change and you do something else just to make sure that it's not going to affect us. I'm like, yeah, but I got caught with my pants down on that one, you know. But I was comfortable.
yes, and that's what comfort does.
Hmm.
It's you don't you in the back of your mind, you know it can change,
Yes,
but at the moment, you enjoying the comfort.
you are. And I find that too when business owners have too much cash coming in,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have one business owner right now that, the cash balance in his bank account is like 2.9 million. And his to run his business is about 75,000 a month.
Wow.
And I'm like, you're what's going to happen is you're going to stop making the decisions you need to make
Yeah.
because that money is sitting there and you don't have to worry about it. And that's exactly what happened with him is he
Mm-hmm.
stopped making decisions. So when I see something like that, I literally will force them to take a distribution, right? Get that money out of there. Have 1.5 to 2 times your monthly expenses in there, but sometimes three. But for the most part, if you got 10, 15 times in there, you're not going to make the decisions with the urgency that you need to make to keep your business moving forward.
Wow. And that's true, James.
It is.
It's very just it's funny how you either at one end of the spectrum or another end of the spectrum.
Yes. Yeah. And we
Wow.
don't realize it till we're too far to the other end of the spectrum. And now all of a sudden we are grasping at straws trying to get back to break even,
Yes.
you know?
So you always got to be on the lookout.
Yes.
Always got to be on the lookout. Wow, Jay, this was very, very, very good and very deep. This is the kind of conversation that you have to look inside.
Hmm. You
And
do.
I love those because it definitely solidifies what I'm doing, or it makes me think about what I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
S-
And that's the thing. I learned a while back that I love helping people. So when we first started, it was me and my wife, and we're helping about 2 to 3 clients a week. And then all of a sudden, I changed my marketing. And the first week I ran the new marketing, we signed 68 clients. And then I
Wow.
had to hire people, right? Now I can help that many. Then I opened an office in Detroit and I can help this many more. And then in Kansas
Yes.
City and this many more. And then when I sold my firm, what I realized is I like building businesses. The practice of law was just a vehicle to get there.
Right.
So when I sold it and I've gone into working with over 450 businesses, helping them help more people. And
Yes.
so that's where, I get my joy is seeing people have those light bulb moments so that they can help more people.
Yes. And that's a blessing.
Yeah.
So I thank you for all that you do. And again, how can our audience connect with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is go to businessaccelerator.institute and there's a forward slash. Oh, it looks like it's JMMB. So I said MMB earlier. So it's just minding my business, just the first letter of each word, JMMB.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then that'll take them to a landing page we've built out just for your listeners, and they can find out more. They can set up a free discovery call with me. There's a free download, top 10 mistakes that you're probably making in your business, that they can get that there. And then they can find out more about the offerings through Business Accelerator Institute.
Well, I thank you, James,
You're welcome.
for blessing our audience because I'm definitely going to jump over there and get my goodie.
All right, do that.
And I hope everybody else does the same because we can never be too smart.
Yes. I've been doing, I'm at level 60 now. I never say I'm 60 years old. I say I'm at level 60.
I like
Um,
that.
and whenever you hit a new level, you still have to learn how to get through that level. So
Yes.
we never will stop learning,
Never,
right?
ever, ever.
Yeah. And
Never.
so anything that I can find or look at or compare my business to another business and take something from them, and how do I implement that in my business? I'm constantly looking for ways to learn.
Yes. I love learning.
Yes.
And one of the things about doing what I do, I always learn something, always.
Yeah.
And it just makes you feel empowered.
Well, and here's the thing, Ida, is I learned not to label anything. Right? There was times where I had payroll due on a Friday. It was $15,000, and I look at my bank account on Wednesday, and there was $1,000 in there.
Mhm.
And I first started when I first was doing that. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible. I don't have the money. How am I going to do this? I have no way to get the money." And when that happens, you start blinding yourself to opportunities,
Yes.
but it doesn't change the facts, right? So even if I try something, I have an expectation of what I want it to produce. But if it doesn't do that, that's also a learning opportunity.
Yes.
Why didn't it produce what I thought it was going to produce? And what could we do differently to change that outcome? Right. So when you look at learning, even if a lot of people will be paralyzed on attempting something because they're afraid they will fail. There is
Mhm.
no failure. There's just an opportunity to learn how not to do it the next time.
Right. Exactly.
So it takes all the pressure off of learning.
Yes, absolutely. Well, James, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you. And we are definitely going to have to do this again uh,
Sure.
because I think, when you're working from the inside out, it's never, ever a one and done, ever.
I agree.
It's consistent work, daily putting the right things into your brain. Uh, so you're definitely coming back. I say that to
Okay.
that.
Awesome. Yeah. Just reach out. I'll come back anytime.
Okay, thank you so much, James, and thank you
Okay.
so much, audience.
Thank you, Ida.